everybody, welcome to episode 1 of the FC Method. This first episode is going to be about the power profile test. So this is going to be vital to our training because it's going to tell me how I produce the power that I do on the bike. And again, from that, what are my weaknesses? How do we approach this to make me the best well-rounded athlete I can be come race day? So we're going to step outside and we're going to conduct 3 different intervals. We're going to do a 15-second max power interval, a 4-minute interval, and a 20-minute interval. So here's how to do the test. So the first interval we're going to do is the 15-second all-out power. You're going to want to do this from a rolling start, sitting in your saddle and up on your hoods. You don't want to have to shift throughout, so again, pick a big gear that you can maintain all the way through. You'll see in my interval I hit about 105 RPM. I even hit a little downhill, but again, I was never bouncing in my saddle, so it didn't really affect me. Alright, so again, the key points are you want to start in a rolling start, big gear, you won't have to shift in your saddle and on your hoods. Next up is the 4-minute effort. You're going to start this with a power you can maintain for about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, or at least that's the goal. Once that power inevitably begins to go down, maintain that effort level. Keep pushing as hard as you can. This is a all-out 4-minute effort, so make sure you don't settle on anything too easy. This is the back half of my 4-minute interval, and you can see I went from mid-400s all the way down to around 250. So again, the power is going to drop, but just keep pushing as hard as you can. So after another 10 minutes or so to cool down from the 4-minute interval, you're going to start the 20-minute effort. Like the 4-minute, you're going to begin with a surge up front, anywhere from a minute to 2. Again, that power will start dropping it. When it does, you're just going to kind of hold on. It's the last interval of the day, so make sure you give it everything you got. Hey, Joby, how you doing?
Good.
Awesome.
How you doing?
I'm glad to hear it. So we've done our test here. We did the 15-second interval, the 4-minute, and the 20-minute, and I'm here to hear my results for how either efficient, powerful, or neither I am. So.
All right. So before we go over the results, what I want to do is just generally go over what this test is going to tell us. And so, as a triathlete, you're one of the things that we're concerned about most is how hard we can ride on the bike and still be able to run. So that's one factor. And then another part of that is what is our threshold? What is our anaerobic threshold? Or let's just call it functional threshold power, because that's a known term. The goal is to improve that. We want to improve that through training. We know training will improve that, but really the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why is our threshold what it is? Why does it exist? And if we know why it exists and why it is what it is, then we can control the variables that really impact that. And so the 2 main metrics that are important to turn the dials, if you will, are your aerobic capacity, your Vo2 Max, and then also your anaerobic capacity, your VLa Max. And we know that a high aerobic capacity is beneficial, and that's helpful. But on the flip side, if you have too high of an anaerobic capacity, despite a very high aerobic capacity, you're not going to be able to use a significantly large percentage of your aerobic capacity. So that's why, for example, like a sprinter, let's say a track and field sprinter, their Vo2 Max can be, in the 60s and 70s, but what keeps them from being an endurance athlete is the fact that their VLa Max, their anaerobic capacity, is very high. So that impacts a lot of what happens at threshold. And so your goal is to be able to race well for the 70.3 distance. So we want to keep those in balance. And so looking at those two, if we look based on your tests, your Vo2 Max came back at 45.2 milliliters per minute per kilogram. Your VLa Max, it's measured in millimoles per liter per second. It's basically your lactate production rate. And your VLa Max is 0.35. So if you tested and you had like a 0.65 for your VLa Max, for me, our priority would shift to making sure we reduce your VLa Max. Now, they work in balance. One way we can get your VLa Max down is to improve your aerobic capacity. The higher your aerobic capacity, the more the more lactate your body can deal with without it accumulating. So that becomes a question of, do we focus more on intensity or do we focus more on volume? And it's not one or the other than like a cautionary advice would be, if your VLa Max is really high, like it's in the 0.6 range, then we want to try to improve our Vo2 Max through mostly easy riding. And that because we can't stimulate your VLa Max any more than it already is. And when we add intensity, when we ask your body to produce lots of lactate, which happens when you do hard, like really hard in short intervals, it's going to continue to strengthen that system. So we have to go more polarized in terms of focusing on endurance and volume. And as we elevate your VO2, then we can add in the intensity. Typically about 6 to 8 weeks is a good time to retest and reevaluate. And the nice thing about testing is, if your VLa Max starts to creep up, we can make adjustments to the training. It's not like we test you once and we have to stick with this until you race. We can monitor that, and if we see your VO2 Max improving, but your VLa Max also getting stronger, which we don't necessarily want, then we have to make some shifts in training. We don't need your profile to be a race profile right now, because efficiency is not at the top of our list right now. We want to just make sure that we're continuing to improve VO2 Max. And it's okay if your VO2 Max, there is a point where it doesn't need to improve anymore. We just stick with where it's at, and then we see how much we can get out of that capacity. The lower we reduce your VLa Max, the higher percentage of your VO2 you're going to be able to ride at on race day. And that's really the target. Some athletes, they have like an FTP of, let's say, 300, and then they go out and they race an Ironman and they can't even produce 200 watts for the duration of the race. It's because they're not developed in the proper way. Their VLa Max too high, so that's what keeps them from holding at 200 or below 200, and why another athlete with let's say the same FTP but developed in a different way can ride at 215 or 220 watts because they develop efficiency through a reduction in their VLa Max.
All right, everybody, hope you enjoyed that first episode. We'll be doing a lot more of these. We'll be going over specific workouts throughout swimming, biking, running. We'll talk about why we're doing them, how we're doing them, and why you should apply them to your own training. If you don't want to do any of the thinking for yourself, reach out to Joby with his email in the description below. Do a power profile test if you'd like, or just full coaching for your next race. All right, guys, we'll see you soon.